网友大家好，欢迎收看中国访谈。由德国著名经济学家乌尔利希·布鲁姆所著的《经济战争论》在中国人民大学区域国别研究院发布。在发布会后，我们特别专访了《经济战争论》的作者布鲁姆教授，请他分享他对于经济战争、中美竞争以及中国式现代化等问题的看法。First of all, congratulations. The Chinese version of your new book, The Economic Warfare, is published. So how would you recommend our audience to read your book? Why it is so important?
Well, the book is on economic warfare, and it is on economic warfare in a very broad sense because it includes all types of conflicts, coercion, dominance, which also affect other disciplines like the political field, the legal field, but also the cognitive field. That means how the brain is wired and how the wiring in the brain may be affected by information policies, etc., etc. And the idea is that economic warfare is an important part of a more broadly organized system of dominance and coercion, like war, normal war, military war is too, but very often other ways of achieving dominance are hidden below that. And this means that if you write a book on that, you must have anthropological roots, you must have philosophical roots, you must have historical roots to show why all this comes together at one point of conflict. And then, of course, you must provide examples to show that the whole thing is relevant, because no theory is relevant if it doesn't happen in practice and cannot explain practice. I think it's the educated reader I want to address. And the nice thing about these 80 philosophers, I tried to organize in two groups. One is the agonal, the conflict-organized philosophers, and the other one is the more peaceful, the cooperative philosophers, is something that is very interesting to read for somebody who is not interested in economics at all, but only to give him an open an eye for a field that if you start to think of philosophy and why philosophy matters, you should start with sort of categorizing it. And under this categorizing of agonal or conflicting, on the other side cooperative and more peaceful, you find many solutions and many answers to present problems which politics in the world have.
So would you please introduce to us what's the difference between economic war and economic competition and economic war and trade war?
So trade war is one part of economic war. Other types of economic war that are also affecting the economy are patent wars. They can be wars in intellectual property. So economic war is very general. Trade war is one specific point, you know, and very often trade wars or economic wars are complemented by military wars. So if you take the Opium War, this was a war that was military at the same time as it was economic, because Britain wanted to reduce its trade deficit, and it's just the same as we have, as little bit the situation we have, and it's so that, very often these attempts of dominance are multi-causal. You have military war, you have economic war, you have legal war. So it's multidisciplinary, and that's why I think it's important to read the book and look into these multidisciplinary causes too.
We know that US President-elect Donald Trump has proposed a tariff on all the important goods and even threatened to place a 60% or more tariff on all Chinese imports. So how would you view his tariff policies, and what are your suggestions for China?
Trump desperately tries to market own goods and tries to prevent imports, because if you do not have a BYD in the United States, you will buy a Ford or a General Motors car. You want to have a car. So less Chinese cars are more American cars. That's at least the way Trump thinks. So again, he tries to press things into the market, and he tells people, if you don't buy our American products, we will block your European products. That was the thing he did in Trump's 1.0 5 years or 6 years ago, when he forced the Germans and especially the Germans, but also other Europeans, in the steel fight that we had. So the first problem is I think Trump is too intelligent not to know that this would create disaster, because it will basically cut delivery chains in the United States that are not only final products, but also other products. Many electronic parts in American cars come from China. Or you make an exemption list that is so complicated that you generate a huge bureaucracy, and he wanted to destroy the deep government thing, the deep government, you know this issue in the United States, so he wanted to bureaucratize the American institutions. So I think he knows 60% is a menace, is a threat, but it's not real. But let's think about something like 10 to 20%. And then you have two options. The first option is do it like, let's say, for cars. But it's you say you go to Trump or the Minister of Commerce and say, you know, we offer you a deal. He loves deals. And say, you know, BYD builds a plant not in Mexico, but in, let's say, in West Virginia, where you have a huge unemployment rate. And doing so, we reduce the problem of your own country. And then that was what the German government or the German car industry did 6 years ago. It was very successful. That's the first thing. And if he doesn't react, I think there are lots of reaction potentials the Chinese government has, especially as China hoards a huge amount of dollars in its central bank. So what happens if China puts these dollars on the free market? Then, of course, you generate an economic shock for the American economy. And this is what the Saudi Arabians did when they were unhappy with the United States, I think in the 1990s. They switched their investments from the US to Canada, and there was a huge jump in Canadian dollars and a huge loss of American dollars. So you have an impact. And finally, you also can devaluate your currency. The problem that your currency is not worldwide exchangeable, you know, easily. It's is an advantage in that sense because you can manipulate the exchange rate. And if you lower your exchange rate by 10%, you offset a tariff of 10%. But the danger for Trump then is that you have less flow of Chinese capital into the American market, and this will reduce the amount of capital in the American market, produce problems for the state deficit, for the national deficit, and then of course increase the interest rates. And interest rates mean inflation, or may mean inflation, and this of course is something Trump doesn't want at all. So China has options.
Yes. So we have also weapons on our hands.
You have, yeah, and China has weaponized its economy quite nicely. You have this idea of the two circles, the two cycles, where you have an inner cycle that stabilizes the economy and another one that is more flexible and can be used to defend Chinese interests.
Now the world economy is under great pressure, and there are economic wars here and there. You are also a professor at Chinese University, so you may have a understanding of the brief situation of China, that China is working very hard to advance Chinese modernization. So how do you think that we can realize this goal with such an external environment? And what does Chinese modernization mean to the whole world?
Well, from a German perspective, Chinese modernization means exports of German machinery to China and making Germany rich. Not again, it is rich, but making Germany rich. So that we love the idea of China's modernization. I think the interesting thing is the sectoral change within China itself. China is switching from an industrial powerhouse to a technological powerhouse. And that means it loses employment in certain industries that move out to Thailand, to Vietnam, to India, to Myanmar, etc., so south of the border of China. For the world, it means that China will have a transition problem, not only in terms of the energy transition, but also structural transition. And I think this is something that is reflected in your present labor market statistics. So an unresty and unhealthy and an unstable international environment is, of course, in such a transition phase is more of a disaster than if you have a very stable going concern economic environment. So China, I think, must have a huge flexibility in adjusting to that. And I think it may be that Europe is a good partner to that. You know, I think it's a good partner. And this is why, for instance, Germany did not want car tariffs, you know, that we say we compete and we understand that, for instance, certain things have been subsidized, because this is something every transitional country does. And if we say we want to transit a little bit more into chip factories, and we give 10 billion of euros to the Intel factory, we cannot complain about Chinese subsidies in the car industry. You know, everybody is sinning a bit. I think at the limit, German industry still sees China as an opportunity and not as a danger. Finally, I'm on the board of a big German bank, and we had a discussion about China at a board meeting a week ago. And it was very interesting to see, you know, that the boss of the bank said, you know, Asian countries, especially China, always wanted to learn from the best. Why do Europeans not learn from the best? That in certain cases is China today. And he gave one example of an investment of an industry where the plant was set up in 1 year. You know, and he said, you know, we know that there is a certain strategic risk in China, for instance, because of American policy. But speed is more important than risk. For German enterprises, they are still investing in China because they see that the opportunities of speed, getting fast to the market, getting equipment raised, getting the buildings built, etc., in a very short period of time is more important than waiting for the building permit for 4 years in Germany. And so the competitive advantage of China is speed and flexibility. And so the Chinese competitive position in that field will be preserved for some years to come.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Professor Bloom. We really hope that your new book can gain a great popularity among Chinese readers.
Thank you so much.